Hi friends, welcome back to the Make It Happen podcast. I'm feeling called to talk a little bit about the process of numbing. I've been making efforts to see what areas I'm neglecting or moments where I'm checking out. This has been something I've been consciously taking note of and trying to track. Numbing tools are so subtle that most of us have them and probably don't even think much about them. I always use the example of our phones being a numbing tool. This happens quite easily because we'll just click into social media apps during a spare moment. We stand in line, we are finished with an assignment or are waiting for the next activity, and maybe even times when we aren't supposed to be using our phones at all. I'll let you fill in the blanks as to what that could be, so while spending time on social media isn't necessarily a bad thing, it pulls us away from the present moment, from our thoughts, and from actual problems that we may need to be giving attention to. I'll give another example and get more personal here. You may or may not know that I've been dealing with some habits related to food that I've been trying to break. For months I've been aware I was turning toward food for the wrong reasons. Many times when disordered eating habits are talked about, it's usually along the lines of restriction or cutting out foods as a means to create control when situations in life feel out of control, just like what I talked about with Melanie LeBlanc-Sturgeon in episode 2. Though it isn't just about being restrictive that creates control, indulgence does too. It's a way to choose what to feel, what to absorb, and create safe spaces to let go in. One can do that with food. I tend to do that with sweet snacks especially, but others can indulge with alcohol or marijuana. Anything can become the controlling agent. What I now see is that the need to control doesn't just pop out of nowhere. Through my own self-exploration and in talking with people who have been through similar experiences, I see that control can also come from the need for comfort. I was feeling unfulfilled in the relationships in my life, and because I didn't know how to change that, I'd eat my feelings basically. It's easier to numb the pain than it is to solve it, right? But there comes a point where that just doesn't work anymore. Not just with food, but with whatever your numbing agent is. There comes a point where your body falls sick, your finances run dry, or maybe, hopefully, something less extreme. Whatever the wake-up call is, consider it a sign from the universe or from your inner knowing that it is time for change. The fact is, we don't make changes based on the calendar system or weekly schedules. Our intuition decides when we need to change. I was getting away with my own crappy habits for a while, but I've been noticing how everything is more connected than I ever realized. The food obsessions have been stifling my need to be open and be seen. Hello, Libra sun sign and Leo moon here. Seriously though, not being open and being seen has prevented me from connecting with others, from being part of the community I long for. The more you peel away the layers of the onion, you get closer to the root of the problem. And for me, it seems like my root is connection. That has been the underlying thing I haven't really been able to tackle or understood how to fill, this void. I'm aware of it so I can look at the ways that I've been numbing and know that those coping mechanisms are not the thing I want, nor are they helping me get closer to what I want. This ties into some of what I said in the intro during the first episode of season 2 of the podcast. So obviously it takes time to create new patterns. I can't just swap out my addictions for the soul nourishing stuff in a clean-cut way from day to day. That rhymed. It takes time to acquire or build that. At least I think it does. If you have other tips or similar experiences, then feel free to share them with me. So that's just a little update and some ideas that I've been stirring over in my head recently. yeah, I'm always working through my own stuff and everyone else is too. It's always really cool when I can hear what someone else is working through, because this personal journey stuff doesn't need to be so lonely. It's not just everything on the material plane. I think everyone's trying to cultivate a better relationship with their selves, with their inner selves. And I think most of us are trying to do that right now. So the more we talk about it, the more we can connect and understand each other. Today's guest also shares about her own experience with addiction, but of a different kind, and how that led to her neglecting her physical and mental health. You know, I love getting into conversations about the deep stuff. In this episode, Colleen describes the downward spiral that happened a few years ago that set her back with her health. We are a culture of doing and overdoing, so it's really interesting to hear how she was sort of forced to release all of that, everything that she was doing and striving for, because her physical and mental health were at stake. I think there's something in here that we can all relate to, or at the very least, it might make you think about when or how you push yourself. So with Colleen, yoga is what first caught my interest, because she would make these wild poses seem so graceful in her Instagram photos. Watching her made me want to improve my own yoga practice. So we also talk about how she first found yoga and later became interested in pursuing yoga teacher training, what her experience was in that program, and her intentions on how she would like to make yoga more accessible for people. In the later part of the episode, Colleen guides us through a relaxation technique that I think is really fun if you happen to be at home, seated somewhere, just not driving or operating heavy machinery. Then I encourage you to follow along, because it's sort of like a meditation and it's really soothing. I think you guys will like how Colleen has a softness about her, but she's also so fiery. This just makes her so fun to talk with. I love it. It's a really fun episode. Let's welcome Colleen Michelle Lewis to the Make It Happen podcast. All right, well, let's get started. I am so happy to have you here again. Thank you so much for coming on the Make It Happen podcast, Colleen.
Thanks for having me.
I started following you on Instagram a few years back when you were posting about yoga, and I was wanting to expand my practice. I'm pretty sure that's how I started following your content. I had done a yoga challenge that you were hosting, and yeah. So I've always admired how your pretty poses look, but also that you use your platform to bring a voice to issues that aren't often talked about.
Oh,
And
thank you.
you're welcome. We'll definitely get into that, but first, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you?
Oh gosh. I'm Colleen. I'm 34 years old and I live in a suburb of Philadelphia. I've had kind of a interesting life path because I have a chronic illness that I was born with. So I'd say like through childhood and mostly through college, I followed like a pretty typical life path, just went to school, had friends, did my extracurriculars, all that. And then when I moved away to go to grad school, my life kind of spiraled into just a mess. My condition, which is cystic fibrosis, started progressing really quickly. I was living completely independently for the first time. Like I had lived away in college, but my parents were still very much supporting me. And, I had a meal plan at the school. So it was really my first time like budgeting completely on my own. And I was only getting paid to be a teacher's assistant, which is a very, very low wage. And my health started declining. So my like foray into being an adult and budgeting was really, really burdened by having medical bills. And at the time, obviously, my parents were still helping me and willing to help, and they still are. But I mentally couldn't really deal with it. I was so stubborn. I wanted to be independent. So I was working too much. I picked up a part-time job in marketing, and I ended up adding a nice little drug addiction to my plate, because I thought that if I had more energy and could stay awake longer and didn't feel tired and really just didn't feel sick, that I would be able to stay afloat and be, what I thought was like a normal person, like a normal 20-something. And of course, that doesn't help my health situation at all. It made things worse, and I eventually had to move back in with my parents. I was in a PhD program, and I had to stop it at the master's level. So I do have a master's, but I'm not using it. I'm actually happy that my life got derailed, because I needed a wake-up call. I needed to stop living that unsustainable lifestyle. But so from the time I was, I think 28 until just recently, I've kind of been not doing the normal timeline progression that I thought my life would see. So I kind of grew up, failed, got very sick, moved home, and now I'm in this uptick where some new medication has afforded me a lot of my health back. And I'm using this opportunity where I'm, living with my parents and not having to worry about much financially. I'm paying my loans back. I'll be paying those forever. But gosh, this is a rambling, hi, introduce yourself answer. But so my life, it followed that kind of dramatic trajectory. But now that I'm doing better and I have my priorities aligned, and I'm, active in my mental health care and my recovery, I'm following a new career path. I want to teach people who don't think yoga is for them yoga. And I love that you said you liked the pretty poses, but that it was more than that, because I, for an entire year, stopped hosting yoga challenges, because I was like, it's so much more than poses. And I feel like in these challenges, we're telling people to just make a shape with their body. That's not all that yoga is. Yoga is a tool that can help you get in touch with yourself, with your true self, and it can help you through a lot of things. And it's my mission to make the practice of yoga more accessible to all bodies, to all brains, to all people. So yeah, that's my rambling response of who I am. I am a person who's gone through a lot. Yoga helped me ride the waves of my tumultuous life, and I want to share that with other people who might be experiencing maybe less dramatic or maybe more dramatic, just waves in their own life. So yeah.
I like the long response, so it's good. It gives me a lot to bounce off of too. So many questions that I can ask from that. So can you sort of explain what cystic fibrosis is for someone who is listening and maybe has never heard of it?
Yes. So CF is a genetic condition that a child has to inherit from both parents, meaning that both parents have to be a carrier in order for the child to have it. It's recessive, which means there's a 25% chance of two carriers having a baby with it. In my family, mine was the first generation for the recessive trait to ever appear. Two of my cousins, who are 2 and 4 years older than me, were diagnosed just before I was born. And back in 1985, there was genetic testing, but it wasn't anywhere near as advanced as it is today. So the only reason my mom knew to suggest that maybe the issues I was having were CF was because her sister's kids had it before I did. But basically, CF is like at the very, very basic level, it is a cellular dysfunction where your body doesn't know what to do with its salt. So in most of us, we have bodily fluid like coating our nasal passages, coating our lungs, coating our digestive system. You just have, it's, mucus. But when you have CF, that mucus is thicker and stickier than it should be because the body's cells aren't putting salt into the body fluid. So it makes it thicker. Like think about when you have a cold and you do like a saline spray in your nose, how it thins things out. That's kind of like CF is a constant stuffy nose and a constant bronchitis. A lot of people have reproductive issues because of the thick cervical mucus. Men typically cannot reproduce naturally because there's mucus blocking their vas deferens. A lot of people have digestive issues because the pancreas gets choked with mucus and then it can't do its job, which is spitting out digestive enzymes into the stomach and producing insulin. I have CF-related diabetes, which is more rare in the population, but it is a thing that we're seeing more and more because CF's life expectancy is constantly going up. So when I was born, it was kind of like, maybe I'll live to be a teenager. Maybe I'll get to drive. Like 16 was like, yeah, that'll be good.
Wow.
But then when I was 12, a new drug came out. It was an inhaled medication that helped thin out the mucus in the lungs. And the lungs are really like the most serious part of cystic fibrosis for most people, because over time, if your lungs fill up with mucus that won't move because it's sticky, it can trap bacteria in there and cause scarring or just like a total fluid fill up where, when there's mucus there can't be air there. So you just end up not being able to breathe, basically drowning in your own fluid. But so a drug that came out when I was 12 really increased the life expectancy. And then more recently, there have been drugs that attack, like, they don't change your genes, but they change the message from your gene to the cells so that your cells can not be dysfunctional, so that your cells can start letting salt flow through your body. And since starting them, I think the first one I tried was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But since the inception of these drugs, I've actually seen like a nearly 40% improvement in my lung function, which is just absolutely wild.
That's incredible.
Because, when I moved home, I thought I would be applying for disability. I thought I was kind of on my way out. And now I'm not. That drug that has given me so much of that is not available to everybody with CF yet. The problem with CF is that there's over 2,400 different genetic mutations that all result in the same disease. They're all in the same spot on the same allele, which if you're like a gene nerd like I am, it just means that the mutations are all in the like same location on your genome. They're just all different combinations of letters and numbers of like what can be wrong. Luckily for me, I have the most common mutation inherited from both of my parents. So I get to take this new drug, but we're still working really hard to fundraise so that people who have more rare mutations will be able to experience this like incredible second chance that I'm getting. Or, if they're young and still healthy, they can just experience a normal life without ever having to worry about a decline. So, yeah, it was pretty big news when the drug became available this past fall. The headline was like, this drug could make CF a manageable condition, like a livable condition, not something that kills people.
When you were back in college and you first noticed that things were getting worse, because you said you've grown up with this, so
Yeah.
I'm sure you had techniques of your own to manage it, but what was actually making it worse at that time?
So in college, I was pretty healthy. I've always done breathing treatments morning and evening. It's just like something I grew up doing, and it doesn't feel, some days it feels like a burden just because I'm lazy. Like some days brushing my teeth feels like a burden. It could also be, a little bit of depression or whatever. But I've always done that. And when I went away to college, I was not as routine as I had been my whole life leading up to that. Like classes weren't as routine. It was like Tuesday, Thursday mornings, and then Friday I didn't even have to go to class. So just not having a routine, I think probably majorly impacted the start of the decline, like not being as vigilant in my preventative care. But also, I don't know, I think that's starting to like really, I don't know, I drank in high school, like at parties, but not nearly to the level that I was out drinking in college. And I don't think that my living environment my freshman year of college was, it was like an old building, and I'm pretty sure that there was probably some kind of like mold or bacteria growing in the carpet. I don't know exactly what contributed to it, but that was, I would say, probably not having my routine was probably like the biggest thing. But it's sort of something where you can't ever really pinpoint like one thing that happened that caused your sudden progression. But in college was the first time that I ever had to go on IV antibiotics for a lung infection. And I think that was also like when my depression and anxiety came to a head, because that whole experience was really traumatic for me. Like you grow up knowing that you have this condition. You've heard and you've talked to your parents about your shorter life expectancy, and you just try to live as if the statistics don't apply to you yet, right? Like I'm healthy, so that doesn't mean me, like I'm doing fine. I'll be doing fine as long as I keep doing fine. So getting sick, it was like I couldn't keep pretending that everything would be fine. Yeah, that was the first time that doctors ever gave me an anti-anxiety medication because I was just crying so much in the hospital that I wasn't sleeping. And then obviously, like, I wasn't getting rest. I couldn't breathe. So, yeah, that was the first time I ever did that. And then I started seeing a therapist more than, but both of the things, both the physical health and the mental health have been just like a constant battle that I need to keep up with.
So, to interrupt you, sorry.
No worries, I'm rambling.
It sounds like it wasn't just your own chronic illness acting up all of a sudden, but like there was a lot of new changes that were occurring with you living in a different environment and then trying to, live a quote unquote normal life, just being a person going to school, like hanging out, having a life. And it really hurts to think about that. So how do you, while you have cystic fibrosis and it takes up a lot of your brain space and kind of changes some ways that you go about your day, but you are still here, able to live a full life, and how do you kind of, try and go after the things that you want to do and have that fun and, fit in all the joys that exist on earth? How do you go about doing all that and not letting your chronic illness stop you?
So it's a dance, really. I think that question was like the key to my whole experience with addiction. You know, as I became sicker, I pushed so hard to not have it hold me back. Like, I didn't want to admit that I could no longer work full time. I didn't want to admit that I could no longer pay for a 1-bedroom condo on my own, which, like, in your mid 20s, everybody has roommates. And I was just so stubborn. I didn't want to downsize my condo. I didn't want to admit that I couldn't afford all the things that I was affording. It was really, and that's like a microcosm of the thing, right? You have to make space in your life to take care of the things that are like emergent and like the most priority, like your health, if you want to have all the other parts. And it took a long time for me to accept that, like, just because my life is inherently different than a lot of other people's, like, I had girlfriends who could roll out of bed and go to class and then, party all night and do the same thing the next day. It was like they didn't have to make the time for their breathing treatments. And I would love to not have to make the time, but, if I don't make the time, then I'm probably not going to make it to class. And I'm probably not going to make it out at night either, because I'll be too sick to do the things I want to do. And even now, I think it's like, it's something that every single person can identify with, needing to take care of themselves first. Like, yeah, it's great to have a social life, and it's great to have a romantic life, and all of those things, your hobbies, your work, really. But, you need to learn how to prioritize. Like, I won't be able to enjoy all these things that I enjoy if I burn myself out energy wise, or if I kind of bury my mental health under being busy, which is something that I used to do all the time. I like thought if I'm busy and having fun, then I'm not feeling the feels. But yeah, it's a dance. You have to, there's a lot of acceptance that needs to happen. There's definitely a self-prioritizing that needs to happen, which is so hard, especially when you struggle with depression and anxiety or any kind of mental health thing. It's very hard to put yourself first, because you kind of struggle with believing that, like, you're worth being put first. So I don't know. I'm still doing the dance, right? Like, I'm still finding that balance between taking care of myself while not letting it be kind of fear motivated. Like, of course, I do have a lot of fear revolving around what could happen if my CF were to progress and things were to get worse, or if my body started rejecting this new medication or something like that. Like, those fears are there. But those fears can't be the reason why I'm taking care of myself. It's got to be kind of from a place of, like, I want more. And, like, I'm doing this so that I can have more. And so I can, pursue things that I find meaningful. And I think that because of my experience, I've also sort of changed my career path to be something that inspires that in me a lot more than what I was originally planning on doing. If you have something that you look forward to and that you think could make an impact, then that helps you stay motivated to take care of yourself as well. At least I'm really motivated by wanting to help others.
It's honestly not too different than what other people, basically everyone should be dealing with. Everyone should be putting themselves first before trying to go out and accomplish all the things. And in your case, you were really forced to, more than some other people. On an average day, people can maybe get away with not putting themselves first.
Yeah.
and your conditions just kind of don't allow that. They're like screaming at you, like, take care of me first, and then you can go,
Yeah.
be out there.
Yeah, mine definitely screams at me. Even the mental health screams at me, because if I'm not consciously, thinking back to my cognitive behavioral therapies or goal setting, or, if there's anyone listening who is familiar with mental health care, just keeping the things that I've learned and grown into in mind and being mindful about the way I'm thinking and the way I'm acting, I'll end up having a panic attack, or I'll end up just crying all day and being like, what am I doing? And that rears its head, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, let's fix this. But with your physical health, there's no escaping it. Like, I'll end up on a hospital bed attached to IVs, and I won't be able to, even leave the bed for 5 days or so. And then I'll have to come home with portable home care type stuff. And it's just, yeah, when it's physical health, it screams at you. Like, it puts you in timeout. But when it's mental health as well, and I even like mental wellness, like people who don't necessarily have mental illness still need to take care of their health in that way. We hear about people burning out all the time, or, prioritizing work over everything else in their life. That starts to scream at you too. But yeah, I think that if I could find a silver lining about having CF, it would be that I have to be mindful, because it's forced me to. But yeah, I liked the way you phrased that.
It sounds like, well, we all know that mental health is connected to physical health and emotional health, like all these, however you want to branch them out, all the health is important.
Yes.
And I imagine that taking care of your mental health can also in some ways be beneficial for your physical health.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that if my first hospitalization hadn't been so traumatic, which that's such a weird thing to say, if my doctors hadn't overtly been able to notice that I needed mental health care treatment, let's say I just put on a straight face when the nurses were in the room and waited to cry when I was on my own, or just if it was hideable, which as a teenager I probably would have hidden it if I had the energy or capacity to do it in some way. If I had been able to hide it, I wouldn't have gotten the help. And I think that the mental health help, without it, physical medication wouldn't have made a difference. When I was out in grad school and was trying to use drugs to make my life work, if that would have just went on being sustainable, I probably wouldn't have lived as long to even get these new medications. Yeah, if that plan would have worked, that just drug yourself to have the energy plan, which I'm happy it didn't work, because I would have just kept going until I was completely nothing, until I had nothing to give. So yeah, it goes both ways. I think that mental health is actually far more important than physical health in terms of self-care, because if I'm not in the brain space, I'm just going to act self-destructively. I'm not going to care about doing the things I need to do for my physical health. I never full on tried suicide, but it's pretty obvious that what I was doing with the uppers and with the overworking and with the trying to appear normal, it was self-destructive. It was self-hating. I wasn't accepting myself or my situation. Yeah, I don't think that I ever would have if I hadn't gotten the mental health help. So yeah, I think that's far more important. And it is all holistic. Like, it's all related. Obviously, what brought on my first depressive episode or panic attack was my physical health. And I think that they do snowball a lot. Like, my first memories of being depressed when I was young were revolved around feeling like a burden because of my physical health. So, yeah, they do go both ways. Like, would I have depression and anxiety if I didn't have CF? I don't know.
How do you identify yourself now as you've gone through therapy and mental health treatment? How is it that you now see yourself? And I think it's also a question about how to view your self-worth and represent yourself separately from CF. I think when someone has a chronic illness, it can be easy to, from my opinion, it seems like it can be engulfing and you just become the person with this disease or this illness. But as humans, I think we want to be more than that. So how do you now identify yourself?
Well, we do want to be more than that. I think that people hate introducing themselves so much, or I took 10 minutes to introduce myself because it's hard to like just put yourself in a small box. Like, oh, that's Colleen. She's a yoga teacher. She has CF. Because it's so small and we're all so much more abundant than that. But it's true that since it is a progressive disease, that there are differing like levels of having the privilege to try to differentiate yourself from like your identity being your disease. When I first moved home and my lungs were like down in the 40%, low 40s functioning levels, I had to kind of be defined by CF because like 8 hours of my day was taken up with medications and breathing treatments and physical therapy. Back then is when I joined Instagram and started getting into the wellness scene on there. And it was to connect with other people who had CF who were using fitness or diet or any kind of, outside of the medical definition of taking care of yourself, like using more holistic things. And I needed the support of that community at that time. So like most of the people that I was communicating with were also, not all of them were like defined by their CF at that point, but that's what held us together. And I don't want to, I bring this up because now that I'm doing better, it's so much easier for me to be like, oh yeah, I have it, but it's just one part of me. Because I'm spending maybe an hour and a half on taking care of myself now, but it's very different. And for everybody who has the disease, it's very different depending on where they are. But I think it's also really easy because it's a passing condition. Like, I don't necessarily look sick. So when I'm meeting people in public, it's not like they immediately know, like, oh, she has CF. But it is something that I bring up a lot, especially because I'm dating now. So it seems like it comes up on the first date all the time as I tell my, why I'm not settled into a career at 34 story. Yeah, so it's weird. It is a part of my identity, and I'm part of the CF community, and that community is really valuable to me. But I do think that some of my motivation on wanting to find something I'm passionate about comes from that identity thing. Like I want to be a yoga teacher, right? And so that's a label that I can throw around, an identity, so to speak, that I am proud of. I got to choose it. I didn't get to choose that I had CF. I didn't get to choose where I live or how old I am or any of that, even what I look like. Yeah, I think that, it's hard because depending on where you are with your health, you do get to choose or you don't get to choose. And I'm just like really grateful that I am at a point right now where I get to choose. And I get to call myself an advocate now too, right? Like I get to advocate for the people who don't get to choose, and I won't ever like stop until everybody has life-saving medications.
That's such a cool way to put it.
Yeah.
I really like that. Your identity can change over time. It doesn't need to be like, I have found my identity and this is it, it's permanent. It kind of
Yeah.
changes based on other things that are going on, and
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing to have chronic illness be the defining thing.
No, sometimes it absolutely needs to be. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
I want to let you in on what my supplement routine looks like right now. So, the first thing in the morning, I like to make a hot drink. Sometimes it's lemon water, but I also love my yogi teas. I'll prep that and grab a pack of my Care of supplements. Previously, I used to dig around my kitchen cabinets looking for each of my individual vitamin bottles, opening each one, gathering a little pile, possibly forgetting a vitamin. It was just such a chore. Now I can get all of the supplements I like to take conveniently in one little package. Care of makes high-quality vitamins, minerals, adaptogenic herbs, probiotics, and other supplements. And all you need to do is subscribe to what you want. When you go to takecareof.com, you can create your profile, take a short quiz to assess your supplement needs, and they'll take care of the rest. It's a fully customizable subscription service that will have your supplements delivered right to your door. No more shuffling around your cabinet looking for pill bottles or having to worry about running to the store to repurchase. I love that I can just grab my Care of packet and everything I need is in there. Care of takes care of you. To try Care of, head to takecareof.com or visit the link in the show notes to get $40 off of your first order. That's takecareof.com. Do you like talking about your CF? I imagine that when someone is dealing with it, I mean, it might be kind of different, as you said, for someone who's dealing with it for, 80 to 100% of their day versus someone who doesn't need to spend as much time managing it. But how can other people approach the topic or ask about it? I feel like it can be a little bit of uncertain territory because someone doesn't want to make things worse by saying the wrong thing or, using inappropriate language. So what's a way to open up that conversation?
It's really like, I think, so as I answer, it's going to be my individual answer, and I think it's important to be discerning in the way that someone's answering when you want to talk to them about their health. And this goes for like anyone, like someone that has a cold, or like one of your coworkers that maybe just had a surgery and you want to ask about it, or just anyone when you're asking health questions. I think it's the best thing you can do is to try to see how they, like, are you open to talking about it, and see like if their body language shifts or something like that. But I am always open to talking about it. Actually, that's kind of a broad stroke. If I'm not on IV medication, if I'm not in the middle of a flare-up, then I am always open to talking about it. If I'm in the middle of it, and you've probably noticed that I do this online, I isolate a little bit socially, because it's just a lot of energy to be putting up a fight and then socializing on top of that, especially if it's about all of the health drama, can be really exhausting, especially if it's like, you just talked to your aunt and now your like neighbor wants to know the same exact story. So I have taken to sharing things in my own time, and I actually share them online so that way, like, everyone that wants to check in on me can all see it at the same time. And that might seem a little like impersonal or kind of at like the selfish end of putting yourself first, but it goes along with that thing, like what I said, if if I'm dealing with something very hard, I have to do what's best for my energy at that time. But otherwise, I'm just totally open. I'm a chronic oversharer. I tell everyone everything about everything. I'll talk about like my bowel movements on my Instagram story or, I've brought up like, the fact that I used uppers to try to ride the wave of not having any energy and how I got addicted to it. Like I brought that up on a first date. It's just kind of, for me, it's like, that's not who I am anymore. So it's part of my story. And I will need somebody who's able to have compassion towards that part of my story. So I don't see the point in kind of like hiding it. Maybe it's not wise to always lead with something that could be a little controversial, but I don't know. In my mind, it's like I'd rather be real. And I'm also a bit scary sometimes when I talk about my health, because to me, like I can talk about these things over and over and over. And like when I first moved home with my parents, I remember bringing up to them a conversation I had with my doctor about lung transplant, because as far as I knew, that was kind of going to be the next big step in my care if my health kept declining. And I brought it up and I was just so casual about it that it actually really upset my mom. And I didn't mean to do that. It was just, the scary things to me, if you talk about them and you're very matter of fact about them, like you can get the support. I have learned that if it's my own parents or if it's people that care about me deeply, that maybe I should tread a little more lightly with the scary stuff, because I don't want them to be hurt by it, or but it's part of the experience. If you're going to be best friends with someone who has a scary illness, you're going to have to hear about her scary stuff. It's just like, well, it's a little different, but it's very similar to if you have depression and you're having really scary thoughts, like you need to talk about them with somebody. And, just like with my experience, like maybe don't be so scary with the people who care about you, but there's got to be someone that you can be scary with, or a group of someones that you can be scary with.
I like hearing that. That's important to be able to not have to put up the front that everything is okay, or like being on your tiptoes, and just being able to say things as they are, having people around who you can talk to like that.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'm really passionate about too, the whole it's okay to not be okay thing, because I've learned over and over and over in my life that I can't just say I'm fine when I'm not fine, because then I won't get any support at all. Right? Like if people have no idea that my health is going nuts, then the decision to move home with my parents is going to look a little odd. Like, oh my God, we didn't even know you were sick. And it's like, well, yeah, I tried very hard not to let you know, but I had a lot of friends get mad at me when I moved home. Not like mad to the point of not talking anymore, but just like mad shocked that I didn't feel I could confide in them about everything that was happening, which I totally could have. Yeah, you need to open up, or else you'll be alone in your feelings and in your experiences, and you won't get the support because nobody knows that you need it. It's okay not to be okay.
Ooh, let's have that be the takeaway message.
That works. I did want to talk about like my teacher training and what I plan on doing with like my teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think because I knew I was talking to you, I kept bringing up the mental health aspect as well, which is going to play into my plans for teaching. But
let's hear about that. I definitely want to hear about what your yoga journey has been like, how you just recently acquired your yoga teacher certification, which congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
But I know you've been practicing for years already, so how did you first get into yoga, and what have you learned about yourself through the process, and then now with the training so much?
Oh gosh. I think I've learned who I actually am in the process. But I started yoga when I was in college. Actually, not even a whole year after that whole hospitalization panic attack ordeal. I got a VHS tape. This is how old I am. My college television had a VCR built into it. I think a lot of us had those. It was silver. It was 2009 or 2008 or something. No, I think it was 2006 because I graduated in 2009. Yeah, so 2006, I had this silver TV with a VCR slot built into it. And I got this VHS tape at the Goodwill. It was called Yoga for Dummies. And on it, there was a 12-pose practice called the Daily Dozen. It was taught by a woman, Sarah Ivanhoe, who is still teaching, and she's still someone I look up to now. She works for Yoga Glow now. She's not a teacher on their platform, but she works on their social media team. And she teaches at festivals and stuff. But yeah, so years ago, I took her Daily Dozen yoga class, I would say 3 times a week, even though it was supposed to be daily. I was a college kid, so And I got it because I had this idea in my head that yoga is something that people get up and do on their mats by themselves in the morning. I don't know if the popular kind of image of yoga has probably changed over the past 10 or 12 years. But I didn't immediately think that it was something that people went to rooms to do. I didn't think it was something that people did in a community. And now I know that's completely the community is such a huge part of the yoga practice. So I don't know why that was the vision. I was I'll wake up, I'll roll out my mat, and eventually I'll just know what to do. So I thought that this VHS tape would teach me what to do, and in a lot of ways it did, because I ended up memorizing the sequence, and I was able to do it without her instruction on the tape. But it wasn't until I tried a bar fitness class that I even got the idea to try yoga in a studio, which is a little ridiculous. But then the anxiety started creeping in, and it was well, can I even, what are yoga studios like? And what if they teach things that weren't on my DVD or VHS? And I just started thinking all the reasons why I was scared to go to a yoga studio. And I just got so in my head, I was thinking oh my gosh, is it going to smell like patchouli? Are they going to be is there going to be smoke? Are my lungs going to be able to handle it? And then I started thinking about how every cue is kind of an inhale and an exhale. And am I going to be able to breathe slow enough for my breath to line up with these movements? And I just got totally inside my head. And I didn't go, it's funny to me looking back on it, because I just got up and went to a ballet bar class without knowing anything. And I had no qualms about that. But for some reason in my head, I just couldn't get up and go to a yoga class because I didn't think I was good at it, which I know now that there's no such thing as being good at yoga. I just didn't feel prepared, which is stupid. But I think it's a really common thought amongst people that are trying to start yoga. As welcoming and accessible as the practice really can be, because, yoga is for everybody and every body, there's still some kind of like aura around it in modern wellness culture that people don't necessarily feel welcome at studios. Like, it's the one thing where you can talk to fitnessy people like, oh yeah, sure, I'll go try a spin class, I'll try a Pilates class, I'll try a ballet bar class or a boot camp or whatever. And you say like, hey, you want to come to yoga with me? And people will be like, oh, I'm not flexible enough for that. Or, oh, I don't have the patience. Or, oh, what is it going to be like? What if I set my mat up in the wrong spot? And there's all of these like just mental barriers that people always have about showing up at a yoga studio. It's like, it's almost funny to me now when I ask people if they'd like to come to a yoga class with me, that I can like predict what they're going to say as a reason why they don't want to. So that's like part of why I want to teach yoga, is because I want to show all of those people that yoga is for them. And when I say those people, I don't necessarily mean like your athlete types. I mean like anyone who thinks that there's some reason why they shouldn't show up to a yoga studio, whether it's like living in a larger body, living in a like differently abled, or whatever term people prefer to use about they're disabled, or some way like needing a mobility device. It's hard to talk about disability because there's so much individualized language in it that I like trip over it, even though I myself am like sort of part of the community. Like, I don't want to say like disabled people, because some people don't like to call themselves that, but the disability community, I would love to see them in my yoga classes. Women who have recently given birth, I would love to see in class, even pregnant or prenatal as well.
So what kind of people then are showing up if it's not the people with disabilities or
Well, I think that in the people who don't have qualms about showing up to a yoga studio, overwhelmingly in our culture right now, it's like able-bodied, thin white women. And I think that that's a big problem, and I want to work to fix it. So it's my goal to create a platform. I'm hoping to do it online first, and then maybe if that goes well, open a studio in my area. But I think that online for me might be the best in terms of accessibility, just because if people are practicing in the comfort of their own home, like they're literally comfortable because they have everything they would need in terms of like accessibility aids or mobility aids, or even like, I think that a lot of the fear of going to a yoga studio is being in front of people and having other people watch you. And if you're in your own home, you don't have that fear.
But then where's the community aspect?
Right. So that's like something that I'm struggling with in terms of that, because especially for people who maybe have some mobility issues, or say they're hypermobile, or say they need some kind of device or some kind of like something about the traditional practice and shape of the poses. Like, if people need individualized, I hate to use the word modifications, but like options for how to do a specific flow, I want to be able to give them one-on-one attention so that they know how to do that. So like one-on-one would be great at first to get people comfortable with what the pose should look like in their body or what the thing I'm saying should look like for them. And it's very hard to demonstrate varying levels of that, or like various positioning of one pose all at once when there's only one teacher. But I think that offering that to people, at least at first, would be helpful. And then I think once people are like comfortable with that, having some kind of group setting, or even like sending them off into the world in their own local setting could be really helpful. I'm still very much in the beginning stages of launching a company. I haven't even registered a name or anything. But I really want to create some kind of system where people can get individualized attention, but not necessarily at like the private yoga session rate. Because if you go to a local studio and you ask for that kind of thing, a private yoga session is probably going to set you back $80 to $120. Mm-hmm. And that's like, if we're talking about accessibility, that's not accessible. Like, especially to people who may have to be paying for additional things simply because of who they are. Like, I have to pay a certain amount of money each month on medication that, you know, the next person probably does not have to pay. And then that person can go to a regular group class where the drop-in rate's like $18, $20, and then they can just do everything fine. So they don't have like the extra medical expense burden, and then they also don't have the burden of needing to know what they have to do differently to make the practice work for their body. So like it's set up for them. And then I think it's really unfair that people who the practice in our current culture, like in capitalist society, it's not set up for people with disabilities, and it shouldn't cost more. I just feel like it's a double whammy there. Like if you're already dealing with something and you already have extra burden, why should you be having to pay for a private yoga session? I don't know. Something I'm like throwing around, but it's hard. So I want to create some kind of system where I can give people that one-on-one attention, but then also provide a class where they feel empowered to use what they've learned in the one-on-one sessions in a group setting, which is something that I also don't see a lot in like typical group classes. And it's funny because I'll do a move that makes a pose more accessible to me in a group class, and I'll notice that like 3 other people copy me because they like also need like the block or whatever is making the pose more accessible. And it's like, I'm always like, okay, well, I should just be teaching. But that was part of the reason that I got certified, was because in my experience learning to practice and learning to make the flows that are taught in the group classes work for me, I had to learn how to modify like all on my own, because I wasn't going to pay the $120 for the private session. I guess being poor helps me in that way, you know, because now I know a whole lot about modifying the breath. Or there's some days where I can't lay on my back because there's drainage happening from my sinuses, or my lungs are just in too much pain. So I know how to accommodate for that. There's just a lot of things that I had to learn how to accommodate for on my own. And I want to be the teacher that helps people learn that in a more accessible way, where they're not like taking to the internet and taking to yoga resources on their own. Because I did learn in my teacher training that a few of the things that I thought were good to do on my own weren't actually. So now that I have the formal knowledge of anatomy and everything, I'd like to help people figure all that out, like in a collaborative way, because no one knows your body better than you. So, yeah. Throwing out my brainstorming live on podcast.
That's cool. Maybe someone will have an idea, or they'll be willing to donate a whole lot of money to sponsor you. Who knows?
That would be more than welcome.
How do you make a yoga class, or when you're teaching, how do you make that session accommodating then for different people? I know you said that like with one-on-one attention, you can do that a little bit better, but if you, I think generally maybe it comes down to, and I don't know if this was exactly stated in your teacher training, you can answer that, but it is the responsibility of any yoga teacher then to encourage students to make a variation that feels good to them, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know if I've just been to some like incredibly bad classes, and you know, recently I've seen more teachers offering modifications. It's still like often after I do one on my own and have other people copy me. But I just see so often when people will be struggling and the instructor doesn't offer any kind of other option other than like take a break in child's pose. And for me, like that's unacceptable. We should always be offering props. There even like thinking about like triangle pose. If someone's like really struggling in that, we probably see people put a block in front of their foot so that their hand can rest on the block all the time. But we don't often see teachers offer like gate pose instead, where you're down on your knee with your leg extended in the same angle that it is in triangle. So you're getting like the same engagement in most of your muscles, but in a much more accessible way. And people don't offer that very often. And it's such a simple one to offer. Like when you're in high lunge, teachers will offer like drop your knee if you're tired. But there's so many options where you can be getting the same benefits, stretching and strengthening the same muscles in slightly different, easier to access poses. And it is hard as a teacher in a group to kind of rattle them off to individuals. Like when I teach for CF Yogi, which is a platform where people with CF can take free yoga classes. It's grant funded and I teach for them online. Sometimes I'll find myself breaking down like a flow for way longer than it would typically take because I'm trying to offer options for people who are struggling with reflux in the CF community. So I'll demonstrate it like 3 different ways all in a row. But I've learned that if you demonstrate it first, the most accessible way, like the way that is not going to hurt anyone first, then as you move on, everyone can do this option. And then the next time you go through, show like the one that doesn't use the prop. And then if people feel like they can get rid of their prop, they can bring it to that level. And for me, it's been a learning process. Like I don't want to like waste people's time, but I do want everyone to be able to do everything. So I think like my trick has been teach the quote unquote like advanced, which is not a thing. But teach like the people who can do what the pose traditionally looks like the idealized shape or flow, teach that one last. So like teach all the options, and then like the most challenging that, you know, the least amount of students will be able to do, you teach that one last. It probably wouldn't be the least amount of students, but does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, kind of building them up a little bit. And
Yeah.
I think if someone who is the so what's the proper language then? If you don't want to call them more
I don't know.
It's not.
I don't know. I've been so like indoctrinated into this yoga system where we call things advanced, and we call options modifications, and those are both like, they're super not accessible, right? Because it infers that like if you can do the harder thing that you are a more advanced yogi, but that doesn't mean that at all. It just means that, I don't know, like you are stronger or more flexible or whatever other physical thing. But yoga is about so much more than that. It's about finding ease in a posture and not being attached to like the outcome of doing said posture. So when you're calling things advanced, you're like attaching like a accomplishment to it, right? And that's not the point. So it's really hard to come up with different things to say because I don't want to call it an advanced posture, and I don't really want to call like propped postures or adapted, I guess would be a good word that's not like, because modified somehow makes it sound like it's not actually the posture, and I guess so does adapted.
Well, adaptive sounds.
I don't know.
That's actually not a bad word. I like the way that sounds because it's not saying that something's less than or more than. Adaptive just means change it to what you need. Also an option, just calling them maybe option 1 or option 2.
Options. That's a popular way that I've heard in like the accessible community. But yeah, I still struggle with it. Like I want to be perfectly saying the right things, but I'm learning, and like I was saying with even like calling someone disabled, there's like person first language is a thing where it's like, I'm not diabetic, I'm a person who has diabetes or something like that. People get really like up in arms about the labels. So with those things, I always kind of see the person I'm talking to, what they would prefer me to say. And I guess with yoga, like if I were to be getting people accustomed to what a pose should look like in their body, then in my perfect world, I would say the name of the pose, and all of my students would be doing what that pose looks like in their body, whether it's with props or whether it's on a knee or up against a wall or whatever they need to do for it to work in their body, without me having to say anything other than the pose name. Of course, I would, it's good practice to be giving out alignment cues and everything. And often as teachers, we kind of sculpt bodies into a shape using our cues, like place your foot here and your foot here and your knee here and whatever. And if all the poses in the room were slightly different, that would be a little more challenging, but totally doable, because theoretically the pose would be stretching the same muscles and strengthening the same muscles no matter what the shape or height or propping looks like, person to person, mat to mat. So I don't know, it's a very lofty idea that I have, but I'm really determined to make it happen.
Can you talk about what the actual teacher training program was like? I'm so curious about that. I've been a little interested myself. Hey guys, I want to let you know that I'm still running my action-based phone call promotion. These are strategy calls where we will chat one-on-one and workshop through any obstacle or situation that you want help with. Too often we look towards other people to tell us what to do when we feel stuck. If you find yourself in that situation often, you can certainly benefit from this chat. The cool part about the calls is not what I'm going to say, but the way I will help guide you to recognize your own inner voice. I want you to come away feeling empowered and with increased clarity on whatever you want to do. If you are interested in having an action-based phone call with me, then head to the link in the show notes to book a chat today.
So I trained with yoga medicine, mostly because I'm obsessed with Tiffany Cruikshank. If you've ever taken her classes on Glow, you know that she's like an anatomy master. Before she got into teaching yoga, she practiced traditional Chinese medicine, which I also think is pretty cool. I don't know. I think that like growing up in the medical world and then also seeking a more holistic care for myself, I really like the idea of marrying Eastern and Western medicine. Yeah, I just really wanted to do her training because of the like strong focus on anatomy. And I do feel really confident in my knowledge of anatomy, having done it. But it was a really great experience. Also, the formatting of it worked for me. It was a week in Austin in July, and then 6 months of online and video and kind of reporting homework. Excuse me. And then a final week in Austin again in December. In yoga medicine, they change the location of their trainings every year just so that they can be accessible to people, which I think is really cool. But I liked the way that that was set up because it gave me more time than like the trainings where you're there for a month and you're certified, because I felt like that would be very physically demanding. And having done it the way I did it, I know it would have been too physically demanding because just my 2 weeks in Austin were really exhausting. The first week I was there, my health was worse than the second week. So, because it was before that new drug came out last fall. So it was amazing to see the change from my like fellow students' eyes, because when I was there in July, I was getting up 2 hours earlier than everyone else to do my breathing treatments. I was doing one after dinner before we went to our evening lecture. And at night, like I wasn't really social at all because I was just exhausted. But then when I went back, I didn't even have to do, well, I was supposed to be doing a little more than I did, but I was able to manage a whole week doing only about 10 minutes of breathing treatments each day.
Wow.
With no negative effect on my health. And I was able to be much more social. Both weeks were super demanding on my muscles. I'm having a whole lot of trouble with my upper back and shoulders and pecs. I am kind of telling myself that I think it's because of my portacath, which is like a little IV hookup site, but it's probably just because I've never really focused much on upper body. And because when you cough, you kind of curl in on yourself from the top and you do like an awful posture crunch. Just like that's what your body does when it coughs. So I'm having to work on those muscles a whole lot. And in our second week, we all kind of sequenced classes and taught them to each other leading up to our final practicum exam where we taught our teachers and the group. So there was a lot of practice happening in that second week.
What does it actually look like if you're, I don't know, like how do you prepare a routine sort of for the class and you have like 20 minutes to do it, or like how's that go?
Yeah, some of it was like that. So the first 2 days were kind of structured exactly like the first week. So the first 2 days of the second week were morning practice morning lecture, then lunch, then afternoon lecture, then evening practice, then evening lecture. And in there's like group activities and just all types of different like learning and part anatomy, part theory, and all of that. But then on the third day of the second week, we started breaking into groups. And it would literally be what you said, like you have 20 minutes to plan a half-hour long shoulder-focused flow, or a half-hour long twist focused, or theme of flow based off of one of the yamas or niyamas, or just kind of like quick fire challenges to steal from Top Chef completely, but like little quick fire, plan a class, teach it, and then get feedback from the people you're teaching. And it was really frustrating because a few of the times they would interrupt us mid-class and be like, okay, so you were teaching a shoulder opening class. Now I'd like you to focus specifically on the rhomboids, or like some random muscle that they wanted us to focus on in the shoulder girdle. It's like, okay, let me modify real quick. Oh my gosh. But it was fun because, like, you think about if you have a class planned and you're a teacher, say it's like heavily shoulders, just to keep bringing up shoulders, and one of your students has an injury, like, are you going to still teach that class, or are you going to modify on the fly and teach something that they can do? And that's kind of like a real life situation. Although once you've been teaching for a while, you won't really have to like make them up on the fly. You'll just kind of have other go-to sequences in your head or in your notebook that you can pull out. But it was valuable and it was really fun, but it was very physically exhausting.
Was there literature that you need to also study up on? What is that like?
Yeah, we had a manual that Tiffany created, mostly with the anatomy in there. And then there was the online platform with the other stuff. So, like, we learned a little bit about Sanskrit language. We learned about the chakras. We learned about Ayurveda. We learned about traditional sequencing. We learned about adjustments, both hands-on and verbal. Gosh, there was 16 weeks or so of the different things online, and most of them were like videos, and some of them we had to record ourselves and send stuff in. There was a lot of practice teaching at home, so I had to like convince anyone who would to let me teach them this half-hour sequence. And so that was really helpful, just getting the practice in doing that. I have to say, like, I'm really fortunate that that drug came out in between the first week and the second week, because I don't know that my body would have been able to do the second week. And it's all up to you. Like, you don't have to do every single thing. So if you're in a group and someone's practice teaching, you don't have to be their student every single time. Like, if your body can't move, then you don't. And they did understand the few times that I had to, ease up to be mindful of my own body's like energy and everything. But I have such a personal issue with comparison and competitiveness, where I just want to be participating and I want to be able to do it. And it's not like I'm competing with the other students. It's that I'm like competing with myself. Like, you can do this, you can do this. And then, all that.
Was the actual, like, the other students in the class, the whole experience, do you feel that people were at different levels going in with their own yoga practice?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, there were some people that it was like they were ready to be teachers from the get-go. In fact, I think there were a few women there who were already certified to teach. They just wanted to do Tiffany's training. Yeah, there were definitely different strength levels. There were definitely different, like, even if 3 people have been practicing yoga for 12 years, there's still going to be different strengths among different people. Like, I've been practicing for a long time, but I wouldn't say that my postures are necessarily strong or flexible. But as far as like the other limbs of yoga, like meditation and all the yamas and niyamas in terms of self-care, I think I'm really strong at those. And then there were people who, like, their practice looked strong, right? Like, they could hop forward or do all the chaturangas or whatever, and they didn't know anything about the other limbs. So it's like everyone had their own strengths coming into it, but I feel like we all were more rounded in our strengths coming out of it. Because as teachers, we have to be prepared for our rooms full of people to be kind of like that as well, right? Like, all of my students are coming in with different experience levels or different strengths, and I have to be able to teach all of them. So you'll get the students who don't want to hear anything about the woo-woo stuff, the philosophical stuff, or the chakras, or any of that. And then you'll get the students who like need that to stay motivated. The class is not complete if there's no intention or something like that.
Yeah, I noticed you said something about being better at the self-care aspect, like I'm not sure, you called them the yamas or something?
Yes, the yamas and niyamas. So the first two limbs of yoga are the yamas and then the niyamas. And they are basically like, I don't want to say like ethical code, but it's kind of like if yoga had commandments. So like if I were to phrase it as a commandment, it would be like, thou shalt not harm, thou shalt not lie. But it's not phrased like commandments. So it's just concepts like non-harming, non-violence, truthfulness, cleanliness, moderation, non-stealing. Gosh, I'm blanking, but there are 10 of those.
What's a favorite principle of yours?
I think that non-harming is a really good one because it can be in terms of not hurting yourself and then also not hurting others. And I think that Brahmacharya, which loosely translates to moderation, its roots are actually in like celibacy and the right use of your sexual energy, because once upon a time yoga was taught to teenage Indian boys and it was like their thing specifically. But in more modern translations, it just gets kind of seen as like the right use of your energy, not necessarily your sexual energy, which in modern life is kind of like a moderation concept. And that actually helps me a lot because, you know, I tend towards addiction and I tend towards overdoing things. And I tend towards really being attached to things. Actually, non-attachment is another one of the principles. But I think that they all really help me, and knowing them has helped me strengthen my like good decision making and my good self-care. I could go on about the yamas and niyamas for a while, but if there's something that you're not familiar with, I think you would really love learning about them.
I can't say I know too much about those myself, and that's not really, whenever you see like a yoga video online, people aren't really going into the full scope of that. They're just like, here's a flow. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that could be very beneficial if that was taught more.
Yeah, I love to theme my classes around different like yogic philosophy, because I think that like even if it's just in little bits, it can be really helpful for people to just for 1 hour or however long they're practicing have that concept in mind and maybe take it back into their lives with them.
A quick interruption from this fascinating conversation to let you guys know about a tool that you can use to deepen your connection to your head, heart, and soul. I created a set of self-discovery journal prompts to help guide you through questions that will get you thinking about what matters to you and provide a foundation for a journaling practice. These are so helpful if you're new to journaling and want a little bit of guidance, or if you just want to tap in further with your vibrant inner self. There are a total of 30 journaling prompts that you can print out and work on for 30 days straight of daily journaling, or you can answer them at your leisure. I've also priced them super affordably because I think they're going to be very helpful and I want to make sure that they're accessible for everyone. Head to my website, melmakesithappen.com, or click the link in the show notes to download your copy of the 30 Days of Self-Discovery Journaling Prompts today. During messaging, we had discussed a possible exercise or maybe a breath work or something.
Gosh.
Did you by chance prepare something? Or if not, that's okay.
I did not, but when I read that, I actually thought that it might be nice to do like a guided relaxation, which is something that I love to do during the final resting pose of my yoga classes. So if that is something you'd be into,
Yeah.
Okay. Then I guess I'll cue you to come into a comfortable position. Typically, final resting posture is laying flat on your back. Probably called it Shavasana before. But final resting posture does not necessarily have to be Shavasana flat on your back. You can lean against a wall. You can prop your head up on a pillow so that you can breathe easier if you're having allergies or anything like that. Or if you're one of my CF people, if you're having reflux, propping your head up would be really important. You can put your legs up the wall. You can have your legs in butterfly. You can have your knees over a pillow. What's important is that it's a position that you can lay in comfortably or rest in comfortably for a few minutes. Starting off, closing your eyes and placing one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. We can all drop in on our breath and bring our focus to ourselves and our bodies. Feeling the rise and fall of your inhale and exhale. Not trying to control the speed or depth, but just noticing. And then when you're ready, place your hands palms up beside your body. And on every exhale, imagine getting a little softer. Unclenching your jaw, removing your tongue from the roof of your mouth. Softening your gaze even though your eyes are closed. Releasing any tension between your brows, around your ears, between your ears and your shoulders on your neck. Rolling your shoulders down your back or underneath your back. Softening. Releasing any tension in your arms. Maybe rotating your elbows to find the place where they're comfortable and at ease. Brightening through your chest as you inhale. Softening into your body as you exhale. Softening your belly. Softening your hips. Maybe moving around again to find the place where your low back is at ease. Softening through your upper thighs and your lower thighs. Softening your knees. Softening the lower parts of your legs, your calves and your shins. Maybe rolling your ankles so that your feet are facing out. Finding the place where your ankles can be at ease and your heels. Softening through your foot and through your toes. Exhaling, softening all over. Noticing the rise and the fall of your breathing. Is your jaw still soft? Did your tongue make its way back to the roof of your mouth? Exhaling and softening. Just breathing at your own pace. And then typically if I were teaching, I would let you rest here for a good 2 minutes.
That was
but since this is a recording, I'll just
that was
tell
really
you guys
relaxing.
I love that part of the practice. It's like my favorite. When I first started practicing, I hated Shavasana because I was always thinking about like how I was going to get home or what I was going to eat after.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's just like a moment for me to lay there and not have to worry about anything. Just like catching my breath, appreciating myself for practicing. And
how were you able to reframe your thoughts that way so that you aren't, running wild with what's next?
I don't know. I wish I had some great advice for that, but I think that it just comes with repeated practice. Like when you're first learning or trying to meditate, how you sit there and you're just thinking of like lists, like to-do lists or cleaning or my leg itches or like anything. You're just thinking of anything else. And it does get easier with practice. Like the more that you sit and just focus on the internal, the breathing, the better you get at keeping your focus on the internal and your breathing without being necessarily like conscious of it. But that's another reason I like the guided relaxation in Shavasana so much, is because it does give students something to focus on, like specific, and you're moving up and down the body the whole time. So you're not like getting bored focusing on softening your neck. You're moving to the next place. So there's not really time to like start thinking about food unless you're drowning out my voice and thinking about whatever, because that happens too. But, just like forgiving yourself. Brains wander. That's what they do. Brains like to think. That's their job. So yeah, I don't have any good advice other than like keep trying.
Unfortunately, even though we're a society and a people that really like immediate results, that's part of the journey.
Yeah. Yeah, and just, don't beat yourself up over it. Like if you notice that, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about dinner instead of being present, like just be like, oh, okay. And then try to be present again. Every breath is a new opportunity to try again.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to move into some closing questions for the podcast now. And the first one being, what are your sun rising and moon signs?
Oh gosh. Well, I know that my moon sign is Sagittarius, and I don't know the other ones.
So your sun sign would be the main one.
Oh, okay. Then my sun sign is Sagittarius.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. You can look up the rising and moon signs with just your birth date and time. You can look that up online. But
Yeah, I've seen those before, and I'm sure I've used the calculator before, but I don't remember. I've never been a big horoscope person, but I do know that my personality is pretty spot on Sagittarius. Like, I am a wanderer. I have a hard time focusing, judging by my hour and 43-minute ramble, I think. We all know that's true. But I do like routine. I'm not like a super fan of spontaneity. So that's like one thing that I know I'm not in line with the stars or whatever.
maybe it's one of the other signs.
Yeah, maybe it's my rising moon or whatever.
That's cool. What are 3 things that make you feel like your best self? These can be products or routines, even though you're not a big fan, or anything.
Well, yoga obviously is my number one. I think that journaling is also really helpful for feeling like my best self, just because it helps me like decipher who I am and who I want to be, which like it sounds so simple, but it's easy to lose those things when you're busy. And writing reflections down helps me stay true to myself. And then in that vein, I think therapy also. I maybe journaling and therapy can be one, and then making time to socialize on like a deeper level than just kind of going out and doing things, I think really helps me feel like my best self. Like if I'm kind of floating through life without like having had a meaningful conversation with a friend or a family member about what's going on in my life, I feel very disconnected and isolated. And so part of like feeling like my best self, my connected self, is making sure that I'm maintaining and focusing on those relationships in my life, because in the past, when things have gotten scary or dark for me, I kind of isolated and kept everything to myself, and that just made everything worse for me. So I put a conscious effort into that. I guess those are all kind of like feelings based things, but yeah, they're my 3.
That's cool. I like feelings based things. That's probably how my list would be too.
Yeah.
What is the best piece of advice anyone has ever given you?
I guess like just start is probably, at least in my recent life, is it's probably not like the best advice, but because of where I am in my life right now, like I'm focusing on starting a business having to do with the training I just finished. A friend of mine, I was talking to him about how I wanted to go do another training. I want to do a yoga for 12 steps training. And he was like, I hope you don't get like caught up in just constantly doing trainings and not actually like starting to use all of this information that you have, like all of this knowledge. You need to like start teaching. I was like, yeah, you're right. And that's like been really motivating for me lately, and like brainstorming what I'm going to do. And I've started designing a website, even though I don't really have like a focus. It's just kind of like starting things and trusting that like the path will happen. But as far as like my whole life, I think that my dad's advice to make good choices is probably the best advice ever. Because really what that advice comes down to is like to be mindful and to think about consequences, which is something I struggled with when I was younger and, functioning from a place of anxiety and fear about my health. So yeah, be mindful and just start.
What is a book, a podcast, a movie, or any sort of resource that has inspired you and that you would recommend to listeners?
Gosh, that's hard. I don't know if this will be like super relevant to a lot of people listening, but there's a book called Hunger, Hope, and Healing by Sarahjoy Marsh. It's about yoga and recovery from disordered eating. And although I never had a full-on eating disorder when I was young and didn't really realize that mental health was creeping its way into my life, I did use medication to control my weight. Like I misused my own digestive medication. And what I think is so interesting about what I learned about disordered eating in her book is that usually in young people who are struggling with mental health, exerting control over your life in some way can be like your first coping mechanism. So a lot of young people will develop eating disorders as a coping mechanism for some underlying mental illness. It's kind of the same reason behind like cutting, because it's something that people can control. And then if left untreated, those things often spiral into addictions. And the way she frames it is that disordered eating sort of is an addictive behavior. And the way that all of those things connect and the way that she talks about like the mindfulness and decision making behind all of it has really helped me understand kind of what was happening for a lot of my young life. And it's also helped me be more mindful of like recognizing when my brain might be trying to sneak in other addictive behaviors as coping for other things that are currently happening. So yeah, I really recommend the book, not just to anyone who's ever experienced disordered eating, but anyone who's ever had any kind of like addictive behavior, whether that be a codependent relationship, a drug addiction, overspending, overworking, as a means to cope with underlying feelings, not even necessarily mental health issues, but just anything as a means to cope with anything in their lives. Because it's just such a good book.
That sounds really fascinating. I wrote that down. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
On a bit of a lighter note, what is your current favorite food?
Oh gosh. So I know that you've done the Tone It Up meal plan before. I still love the recipes, even though I'm like not really on board with diet culture anymore and like sharing what I eat in terms of like how it influences my health, because just because I eat something doesn't mean it's going to work for anyone else. But they had a recipe that I thought was like so novel, and I still think it's so novel. Back I don't know, like 3 years ago. I think it was in one of the bikini series, which like, ugh, cringe. But you slice an avocado in half, and then their recipe calls for honey. But since I'm vegan, I've been using date syrup, which I think it's called Salon, Salin, or you can probably find date syrup. Devash makes one. I think Walmart carries it now. But I've been using that as the drizzle, and then sunflower seeds. And it's like totally a TIU recipe, but it's so good. And I've been having it for like my afternoon snack for, I don't know, a few weeks now.
Oh, wow. I've seen that before, but honestly, I've never had it. I just thought like, it's so simple, but
it is so simple, but it's like a perfect, because like it's fat, right? So it's like filling, and it gets me from lunch to dinner without like, so I have like a big chip problem. I will sit down with like a bag of like Tostitos Scoops tortilla chips, and I'll have like a small, like I'll pour the salsa out of the jar into a little bowl, and it's like an appropriately sized serving of salsa, right? But then I'll finish the salsa and I'll just keep going on the chips. So yeah, I've been trying not to have chips be involved in my afternoon snack, because then I'll end up eating like the whole bag and I won't have room for dinner, and that's like not a balanced diet, you know. It's like all carb with no protein or fat, which like I'm not against carbs, but like, you know, you need to have a balance. So yeah, I guess like chips are always my food of the moment, but as far as like what I'm kind of obsessed with lately, it's the avocado with the date syrup and sunflower seeds.
If you could have dinner with one person, living or dead, who would it be?
I don't know. I feel like, gosh, I really don't know. Like it'd be so fascinating to like have dinner with someone who's passed, so that you could ask them what things were actually like back then, and like blow their minds with like everything that's happened right now. But I'm also like really drawn to like, how fun would it be to sit down with not Trump, but like a president like Barack Obama or Michelle Obama.
Mm-hmm.
Although it would be actually kind of really entertaining to sit down with Donald Trump, I think. Like, would he entertain a conversation? Because I feel like he's so fragmented. He's like so all over the place. Does he actually have conversations? Because I'd like to pick his brain, but only if he'd actually like answer and listen.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe like Michelle Obama.
Okay.
But also maybe like Mindy Kaling.
Oh.
I don't know. Tina Fey. Like I'm like thinking of like women that would be like strong and could give me good advice or whatever. But yeah, no, I have no idea. I'm not good at this game.
It's okay. You named you named a couple of really cool people. So any of those, I like multiple answers. I'll take it. You've kind of described some of the plans that you have for the business you're building, but what can listeners expect from you? What's next?
So as far as developing my online platform, I think that I'll be seeking some input from people as far as like taking a sample class with me, and maybe going over like an intake process. I'm struggling with, I don't want it to feel too sterile, and I don't want it to get too caught up in like the medical aspects of what people might be bringing into practicing with me. But I do want to focus on the disability community. What people can expect from me next is like just listening to people about what they would like my vision to look like. because I think that people will really get on board with like the customized one-on-one interaction that makes the practice accessible for them. But then I need to figure out how people would be most comfortable bringing the community aspect into that, whether that would be like a once weekly group class, or if a Facebook group would be okay for people and random meetups or stuff like that. I don't know. So yeah, I think that next for me is the development of a company that focuses on making yoga accessible to people with special needs, not necessarily like in the way that we're used to hearing the word special needs, but like different circumstances where they don't necessarily feel ready to go to a studio class. I want to help people feel ready and confident and empowered to do yoga in their own body.
I love it. Where can people find you online?
So I am Colleen Michelle Lewis on Instagram. I do have a Facebook page that I have been neglecting. I set it up and thought that it was cross-posting my Instagram posts onto it, but it hasn't been doing that for like ever. But yeah, I am on there and I do plan on using that a little more. I also have ColleenMichelleLewis.com, but I haven't really been focusing on that either. So yeah, basically Instagram is the place to find me. If you'd like to email me, it's ColleenMichelleLewis@gmail.com. If you would like to offer me suggestions on my convoluted idea, then yeah, send me a DM or an email.
Cool. All right, then that's the end. Thank you so much, Colleen, for meeting with me and chatting all things mental health and physical health, yoga, all this stuff. It's up my alley for sure, and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. You asked really great questions, and I appreciate you being patient with me. Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Alright guys, that is the end of the episode. If you have any curiosity about Colleen, I would 100% recommend following her on Instagram. She doesn't disappoint. I love that she openly bears the hardships that she has faced with cystic fibrosis, anxiety, addiction, and more. She uses her platform to bring light to aspects of wellness that the average person might not be considering. Wow, even saying the average person right now has me thinking like, what does that even mean? Average is basically a myth at this point in time. Yeah, like this conversation made me think about language and how we refer to people and how we identify things like disabilities. Yeah, I need to ponder over this. Anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing her bring her dreams of an online platform for yoga to life. I've taken a class with her, and I can fully attest to how she really caters to the varying needs of her yogi community. I know anyone who takes classes with her will be in good hands. If this episode brought you any sort of value, please leave a 5-star rating and review for the podcast over on iTunes. Yes, you heard me, 5 stars. You can also share the podcast on your social media, in an email or text, whatever you like using to share things, whatever your modality of choice is. I welcome it all. So that's it. Yeah, thank you so much for tuning in, my friends, and I look forward to connecting with you again next week.